And we're live. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the World of Gray podcast. In a society divided by black and white arguments, we are here to help you explore the world of gray. I am Kelowna's Cougar Meat Kid Colin Cutler, and he is Hardy Boy Cutler. Put him back down here. He works 1 hour a week, and he is not excited. So today we ask the question, is democracy dead? Is democracy dead? And I mean globally. Do we have many representative elections or elections that really represent the people? There's a lot of corruption out there. I always argue that getting money out of politics should be step number one to make our, democratic system a little bit more free for and a little bit more for the people. So we can discuss that a little bit as well. Now, I was saying this before I went live on YouTube. I don't have like a million facts. This isn't an educational piece. It's more of a question. But if you're wondering where I got this concept or the idea for this live stream, Hardy's really giving her over here. It was from watching the impeachment. I made a prediction a while ago that this impeachment would lead to nothing. And I'm not the only one, obviously. A lot of people feel the same way. But my prediction was that Trump would get acquitted. It would help him in the approval ratings. Bernie Sanders would get smeared in the primary, which is happening. And Biden would go through. With Biden being in the general, a lot of young people are going to stay home. And we know that historically, when people stay home and there's low voter turnout, that it favors Republicans. My question, though, is about no witnesses being called for the impeachment. And I really want to get other people's opinions on this. Do we think that this is a better option and that Trump did nothing wrong and that we shouldn't waste any more time on the impeachment? Or in a system where there are checks and balances, so in a government where there should be checks and balances, is the bare minimum to call witnesses? So if you weren't really following the impeachment trial, Trump's lawyers switched from Trump did absolutely nothing wrong. There was no quid pro quo with the call withholding the foreign aid to the Ukrainian government. He did nothing wrong, and so therefore there should be no trial. And then they slowly started changing it to, well, he did hold the aid because, proof came out that he did hold the aid, but they didn't feel any pressure or anything like that. And then there was some evidence that the Ukrainian government was a little bit worried, or was very worried about the aid being withheld, especially with their issues with Russia. And then they changed it to, well, if the president feels like him getting reelected is in the best interest of the American people, then he's allowed to have a quid pro quo. And that quid pro quo isn't an impeachable offense because he's doing it for the American people. I think it was that moment that I watched that fired me up a little bit and made me want to do this topic for a live stream. Also, like I say, I'm learning all this stuff. That's the point of this podcast, is to see my opinions change. And I want to see, am I completely out to lunch? To me, when someone starts saying, well, if I think that me being president is better for all people, then I can pretty much do whatever I want. To me, that sounds like something dictators say. And I don't want to be an alarmist or an extremist, like some of these memes that are going around comparing the United States to, Nazis. But I do feel like it's a slippery slope. And I'm not saying there's not other politicians that probably could have been held to this standard and that Trump's not being picked on, because maybe he is. He's not part of the cool kids, right? He was never in that billionaires club. And maybe he's not playing ball the way that the establishment wants him to. I think what gets conflated there, though, is people saying just because Trump doesn't want to play ball means that he's going to drain the swamp and he's going to do everything for the people. Well, no, Trump does everything for Trump. So Trump is doing things for him, which doesn't really align with the establishment. So the establishment is trying to shut him down. That could be a reality. I'm not saying that is the reality. That could be the reality. But I've talked to people about this before. It's in the lapse of data, we tend to make up stories. And the best story, and I know this as being a professional wrestler, the best story, Ben has joined us, Mike has joined us. Thank you for joining. In the lapse of data, we make up stories. Humans love stories. This is a big reason why I am not a believer in mainstream religion, because I believe that religion was slowly developed by astrological myth stories when our ancestors didn't understand what the stars were. It was dark out. There's a lot of predators, and they looked up at the stars and they made up stories to make themselves feel safe. And we do this a lot. And the easiest story to tell ourselves is good guys versus bad guys, day versus night. And unfortunately, it looks like there aren't good guys and bad guys. There's just two corrupt bad sides at the moment that are just acting in their own self-interest. And that's not saying that Trump hasn't done some good things. He signed some bills on like animal cruelty and a few other things that do make him look good. And he's signed a few things that where he's committing to promises that he made on the campaign trail. But he's also, there's a lot of things he promised on the campaign trail that he's not following through with. So it kind of goes both ways. And at the end of the day, Trump is all about Trump. Actually, if I get away from, I don't want to get away from the watch party, but I did save, maybe I can bring it up with the watch party still going. No, it's not going to let me do that. I did save a tweet that somebody made that was showing all the profit that the Trump family has made since he's been president. And it's upwards of $300 million, which I don't know if that's true. So if anyone has a fact check on that, but just because he forwent his salary as president does not mean he's not corrupt and making money off this. He had the Saudi government pay him hundreds of thousands of dollars to stay at a Trump resort for some sort of ambassador tour or something like that. So I really would like to know what people's opinions are of this. I'm feeling a little defeated with all of this. Mike Chisholm has joined us. Our hearts go out to Mike and his family. Thank you for joining us. We asked the question, is democracy dead? And honestly, if no one's commented yet, maybe nobody wants to touch this. Nicole has joined us. What up, Nikki? But like I said before, with this impeachment trial, not even willing to bring witnesses. I mean, the thing is, Trump saying he did nothing wrong. It's a perfect call. It was a perfect call, whatever the hell that means. A couple things. If it was a perfect call, why is the rest of the call, other than the summary that was released, being held onto a server, in a secret server with a bunch of other stuff? That's a question that Trump supporters don't want to ask. And if you did nothing wrong, why can't we call witnesses? I mean, they're in the world of gray. There is the argument that maybe Bolton is just going to tell a bunch of lies because he's mad that he got fired. And like I said before, John Bolton, not a good guy. So John, if you're wondering what I'm talking about, John Bolton came out with a book called In the Room or something like that. And he was saying that he has all the information of Trump withholding foreign aid from the Ukrainian government on purpose, so they will investigate Joe Biden. Like, he admits that to Bolton. He wants to freeze it and he wants to hold it longer. John Bolton is all about war, and he didn't want Trump to hold the aid because he wants to support Ukraine because they're anti-Russia. Hold on, I'm going to scroll down and see if there's some comments here. Oh, it's just Mike Chisholm saying he loves me. I love you too, bud. And I miss you. And this is a lot harder with no one here to bounce ideas off of, especially when no one's commenting. So it just ends up being my bullshit opinion. You got to remember too, like, when people voice their opinion, like we do in this show and like any other analyst does, and there's much smarter political analysts than me. These are just my opinions of other people's opinions. But I asked the question, is democracy dead? Because if a trial is going to happen without calling any witnesses at all, is it even a trial? And that question, and it's just a waste of time. Like when you have trials like this where there's just really no point to it at the end because the Senate controls it and they're going to quit Trump, it just becomes a big dog and pony show and it distracts from other things. Like I've said a million times, we still have the humanitarian crisis in Yemen happening right now, where you have millions and millions of starving children because the Saudi government bombed a port in Yemen so that no supplies can get in because they're trying to starve the Shia people or the militias there. And, like that stuff's still happening. There's still real life stuff that matters. Not saying that this impeachment doesn't matter. It does matter. People should be held accountable. I'm not saying other president shouldn't have been held accountable, and I'm sure there's other impeachable offenses. The other interesting concept that's come up, and I'm just going to rant until someone starts pulling their opinion in here, so please comment below here. But one interesting thing that started coming up from the left is whether or not... Oh, Jared has joined us. Kayla McBurney has joined me. Kayla, one of my best friends here who I never see anymore. Kayla McBurney. We love Kayla McBurney. She might be gone now, but that's okay. One interesting thing that has been talked about in the last few days is, should the House Democrats, so the Democratic Party in the United States controls the House, which the House is the ones that bring forth impeachment inquiries. The question is, should they impeach Trump again for similar reasons, but changing it from abuse of power to actual crimes? So like bribery, holding foreign aid is like a bribery for something. Nick Zelansky has joined us. I don't think Nick's ever come on and watched this podcast. Yeah, one of the promoters for Thrash Wrestling. It's given me a lot of opportunities in my career, but that is not what we're talking about today. So should the Democratic House impeach Trump again and change the charges? I'm sure there's a lot of different things that you could put forth that Trump has done that are illegal. I mean, using campaign contributions or campaign money donations to pay off his porn star affair. I mean, that's campaign violation. So not only has the Senate, the Republican Senate, blocked any witnesses coming in, they've also spewed things like not getting due process because they didn't want to participate in the inquiry, which would be their due process. But then because they chose not to participate, they then complained that they didn't get due process. So a bit Orwellian there as well. But I think there are things that Trump has done that would be criminal. And again, I'm not saying other presidents haven't, but I think all presidents should be held to the standard. And this is the reality that the United States is in right now, and this is their president at the time. And it's, to me, if this is the way a two-party system works, and we have multiple parties and it's not perfect here in Canada, but if this is the way a two-party system is going to work, like, really, what's the point? So really what it comes down to is justice for the American people. The American people that voted this guy in, and he, gave tax cuts to the top 1%. He's committed a bunch of campaign violations. He can barely get a sentence out. Like, from any objective observer, it's it's pretty crazy. Hey, it's highly entertaining. Don't get me wrong. But when it comes, like, this is real. This is the thing, is this isn't, it seems like a weird reality show and we can all just sit back, and hey, in Canada, we can just sit back and eat popcorn. But this is real life for the American people. And it's sad. It's sad that within that process, someone can be this corrupt and just get away with it. And I think the House will just roll over and let it go and just hope that they win in the election cycle. But then you factor in the fact that there's smear and Bernie Sanders, who in the polls looks like the most likely candidate to beat Trump in 2020. There's actually audio that was leaked by that Parnas, who was part of the Trump cover-up or the Trump scandal in Ukraine, where they're out for breakfast or dinner, and Trump admits that he didn't want Bernie Sanders in the general because Bernie's better on trade than him, and worried about other policies as well. So he was the one person he didn't want to see. So even Trump knows that Bernie has a shot against him. And ironically, I think though Trump doesn't think Bernie's going to get through the primary, because all these other corporate Democrats that are surging up in the polls a little bit, like Bloomberg's in double digits, I'm pretty sure now. Trump is saying that they're rigging the primary against Bernie, which is hilarious because it's kind of true. And you've actually been seeing more honest reporting from Fox News lately. Alex Disnato has joined us than any left-wing news like MSNBC or CNN, because the Bernie smears are in full force at this point, because Bernie jumped up in the polls. And I just finished recording a video called The 7 Smears of Bernie Sanders, which hopefully producer Pete can get and edit and put out ASAP. But like I said in the video, when I was doing the research for the Bernie smears, I was stumbling upon new Bernie smears as I was trying to find the old ones so I could have a little bit more context on the Bernie smears. But as soon as Bernie Sanders jumped up in the polls, the mainstream media has jumped all over him. Elizabeth Warren's campaign was trying to call him a sexist, which is hilarious. I said it in the video, but there's literally video of Bernie Sanders being arrested, and while he's chained to two African-American women fighting for, this is in the 70s, fighting for women rights and rights for people of color. And then you turn around and try to paint him as a sexist, which to me is pretty freaking hilarious. So when that video comes out, definitely check it out, because Pete has joined us. Pete, I was just saying, hopefully you got that video I sent, 7 smears of Bernie Sanders. Hopefully you can edit it and get it out, because that's the Elizabeth Warren one is a big one, but there's actually some pretty hilarious smears out there, because when you have somebody as consistent as Bernie Sanders, it's really hard to smear somebody that hasn't flip-flopped, because that's really what smears are. Anybody taking in donations from different super PACs is eventually going to flip-flop on some sort of policy, because they're going to say a populist message and then they're going to backtrack once they get donors from someone that doesn't like that. And Bernie Sanders has never done that. He is one of the only candidates to vote against all unnecessary wars like the Vietnam War and the war in Iraq. So they're really trying to find any smear they can. So I really encourage you to check that video out. I actually I had fun making it, and I got a little riled up. So it's a little longer than I wanted it to be, because some of the articles were so amazing. I just had to go over some of the points. So hopefully Pete can get that down to something a little bit more digestible. But it's an interesting time. And you know, I've talked about my mental health issues before, and a family member of mine, we kind of go through the same stuff, because these injustices, for lack of a better term, do start to weigh a little bit heavily on my soul, because at the end of the day, I care about human beings, even though I don't like a lot of human beings for a lot of reasons. But this political cycle, seeing just how manipulative people that have power, and by power, I'm not necessarily just talking about people in government. I'm talking about people with money that don't want to let go of that power. It's pretty depressing to see the lengths they'll go to push someone down that really has fought for people his whole life. And Bernie Sanders is almost 80 years old. He's not doing this for the fame or for money. He's doing this because he knows it's something that he has to do. So it's pretty interesting seeing what's going on right now. Roy has joined us. Charlie has joined us. We're asking the question, is democracy dead? Basically, I'm basing this off of the impeachment trial, not calling any witnesses, but there's a lot of other examples to the lack of democracy, especially in the United States. So I really would like to hear anybody's opinion on that. Rob has joined us. Rob follows the World of Grey and is quite active in my posts. So Rob, if you have any comments of is democracy dead, or anything about the impeachment trial, the impeachment trial, I think, shed light on a few things. The problem, so a lot of things came out about Trump that really painted him in a bad light. The problem is, even myself, who has this podcast and is trying to learn about politics, I tried to watch a lot of the impeachment trial, and honestly, I was bored to tears. And so I didn't watch it, as much of it as I would have liked to. I also didn't really retain a lot of the information, for the reason that I was bored and falling asleep a little bit. So the issue is, yes, the House Democrats did have some excellent points. They debunked a lot of myths about what happened, like Trump saying that the Ukrainian government felt no pressure, which wasn't true. There were some people within the government, especially in, I guess, the military branch or whoever would be receiving this aid that were concerned because of the threat of Russia if the United States doesn't have Ukraine's back. The issue is the individuals whose minds you really have to, I don't want to say change, because I mean, kind of you have to change them, but I don't want to say like, oh, we're just trying to change their minds, but like present the facts to, and then they can make up their own mind. But the individuals that needed to hear that information were probably not watching anything other than Fox News. And Fox News did this absolutely brilliant, had a brilliant strategy for live streaming the impeachment trial, where so they didn't not obviously they didn't believe in the impeachment trial, or at least that was the narrative they're pushing. They thought they're saying it was a hoax, and they were following the Trump narrative. However, you don't want to not show the impeachment trial, because then that makes Trump look guiltier, makes you look even more biased, even though Fox News is very biased and they're borderline propaganda. I would say they are propaganda, but when I say that, it makes me sound very extreme. But at the very least, you got to admit that they're borderline propaganda. And I have some videos that you can watch on YouTube that where I kind of show that or explain why I believe that they're propaganda, especially when they talk about progressive tax rates, and then just showed clips of riots in Venezuela. So I do have a video on that, which was pretty amazing to watch, and then pretty fun to break down. But the Fox News did this amazing thing during the impeachment trial where they showed the impeachment trial, but they showed it without any sound. So you just watched it. So it's just people's mouths moving. And then the Fox News reporters would put that up in like the top corner, and then they would just tell you what was being said. So then they would just create their own narrative, right? And they would be smug, and they would use ad hominems where they just attacked people's characters, which is a logical dodge. Again, I need to find that YouTube channel that talks about this, but there's information dodges or conversational dodges you can use, and ad hominems are one of them, where instead of presenting facts or arguing facts that were presented, you just attack somebody's character to decredit, to make them lose credibility. Easy for me to say. So it's a dodge. And you can watch Trump's Twitter feed, and that's pretty much all he does is ad hominems, because he's not the brightest tool in the shed. He's got a really good mind for media perception, and ad hominems work. It's a dogmatic approach or a demagogue approach where you just feed people's fears, right? And that's pretty much what all politics are doing at this point. So Fox News. So I mean, if these people that support Trump, they're just gonna listen to what Fox News says, and then they're gonna parrot that when they get into arguments with somebody that have opposing views. So there's a big uphill battle for candidates like Bernie Sanders or Andrew Yang's, for that matter. Again, which is why my prediction would be that Biden will go through the primaries and Trump will absolutely destroy him. Also, on a side note for Biden, if you follow Biden on the campaign trail, it's kind of shocking that he's doing as well in the polls as he is, because there are multiple videos of him telling people to vote for someone else, like, oh, go vote for Trump or vote for somebody else, or good luck voting for Bernie Sanders. He's kind of poking at people, holding people by the collar. There's one where a guy is asking why he's attacking Bernie Sanders, because Bernie Sanders said that Joe Biden wants to cut Social Security, which he did. And then he's saying that Bernie's lying, which he's not. And Biden keeps attacking him, saying there was doctored videos and all these things. And a news reporter is asking, like, why do you keep saying this? And why do you keep saying it? And Biden's walking away, and then he turns and he goes, why? And he panics for a second, and then realizes he panics, and then does a quick switch and says, you need to calm down, man. Look how nervous you are, to the reporter, which is pretty amazing. And while holding him by the collar, which is pretty much Biden's move now. So Biden kind of breaking down a little bit on the campaign trail. He had some weird speech about how I don't know what the time frame was, like when he was younger, but he's talking about being by a pool and how the kids would rub his legs, hit the hair in his legs because it would shine in the sun, and kids sitting on his lap, and he likes when kids sit on his lap. I'm not even sure what the question was or what the point was, and I'm sure that clip has just been cut down to the weird part, so like fair enough. But it's interesting, him talking about his hairy legs. So I listening to what he talks about, it's amazing to me that he's doing as well in the polls as he is, other than the fact that obviously he has name recognition, and a lot of people don't actually follow politics. So when you poll them, they're going to go, hey, yeah, Joe Biden. And a lot of those polls are pretty skewed to the older demographic. But on that note too, when you look at the polls of age demographics, the 18s to 50s are like 40% for Bernie Sanders or something like that, and like 7% for Biden. But when you flip it the other way, 65 plus, it's like 30 something percent for Biden and like 9% for Sanders. And then if you look at the last Iowa poll that came out today, for Iowa, which that caucus is tomorrow, it's literally a 25-25 or 24% split between Biden and Sanders. So it's going to be an interesting day tomorrow. So Rob has said, I understand that Mulvaney is the majority, but it seemed like the judge was taking orders from him. This whole thing is terrible. He doesn't want witnesses because he is worried about losing his job. Yeah, no, and I think that's a big issue with the Trump presidency. Is he's someone that said he was going to drain the swamp, and he just fired a bunch of non-Trump loyalists, and everyone he has in is a Trump loyalist. And if you're not, you get fired, like a John Bolton, the girl that was the ambassador for Ukraine, who he had mobsters tail him, that Parnas or whatever, or they were tailing the female ambassador to Ukraine, who was very worried about Trump holding aid, and she testified or in front of the House, I believe. So pretty interesting there. But yeah, I think Rob, you have a really good point. You put a bunch of Trump loyalists in, like Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham, who have about 3 brain cells between the two of them. One of my favorite clips, just it's a bit of an ad hominem, but it's Mitch McConnell, so fuck that guy. It's a bunch of clips of Mitch McConnell speaking at the trial, just talking about dinner. He's always the one that I think we'll break for dinner around 6:30, which just shows how little he fucking actually cares about the trial, because he knows it's a complete waste of time and that they're just going to acquit Trump. So it's pretty interesting. # feel the burn. Yeah, I mean, I've tried to be neutral with this whole thing. I mean, again, I'm Canadian, so what does my opinion even matter? But if anyone from the United States is watching this, I truly believe that the only way for your country to start moving in the right direction is to vote in someone like a Bernie Sanders or an Andrew Yang. You got to vote somebody in for the people. But what the fuck do I know? When there's 500,000 people going bankrupt for medical bills, and most of the country can't afford a $500 emergency, you need things like a higher minimum wage and Medicare for all. We got universal healthcare in Canada. It's not the best. It's not the best healthcare system. It could be better, but I'd rather have the system we have, even when there are longer wait lines, and not have to worry about going broke because I need a triple bypass for $100,000 or whatever it is. Also, in the United States, they're paying twice as much per capita per person. So to say that a Medicare for all is going to cost everybody more money and blah, blah, blah. Well, it's just not true. It's just where you're coding the dollars. It's like when I have a budget, right, for work, I code things to different things, right? Like if I code different expenses to different things different categories. And it's really, we're discussing, is it a tax from the government, or is it a hidden tax from private corporations? And in the United States, they're paying twice as much per capita on healthcare because you have that for-profit system right in the middle, taking their cut, right? And then that also makes it harder for them to negotiate drug prices, because you don't have one collective group of people saying, hey, you're selling to the whole country, you're dropping the prices. No, you have a bunch of different insurance companies, and then you have this is where the competition mechanism doesn't exactly work, right? Which I'm sure some capitalistic economists would. McConnell. Yeah, I didn't want to say anything about Mulvaney because I was like, I'm pretty sure I'm right, but yes, McConnell. Yeah, McConnell doesn't give a shit. McConnell and Lindsey Graham, they're just sucking Trump's dick. Tracy has joined us, so we're just asking the question: is democracy dead? And it's fading, man. And I think Trump was I don't know, this isn't just my opinion. Michael Morris said this before. He's the Molotov cocktail. He was the bomb in the political system where people just got fed up and they said, you're going to give us another fucking Hillary? Fuck it. Let's vote this guy in. Let's vote the guy from The Apprentice in because he's saying some shit we like to hear. And he went to the left of Hillary. This is why he got voted in. And everyone's saying that you can't go too far left and you got to be centrist and you can't go too far left. What are you even talking about? The Republican went more right than the Democrat in 2016, and he got voted in because of that. He did a populist message, and then he did a quick switch at different rallies and did a racist message to all the racists. He just fed everybody what they wanted to hear because Trump is the greatest con man of all time, and that's why he got in. And then you're going to say that a Bernie Sanders is telling people that they're going to get a higher minimum wage and free Medicare and free college. You're saying that that platform isn't going to work? And then you're trying to flip around and say that, oh, he's got too aggressive of a base, and that's not good for the Democratic Party. That's, again, why Trump won, because of Trump supporters. And a lot of them are still brainwashed to this day. I think he's still doing good stuff for the American people. So the reality to the narratives do not match right now. And this is the issue I'm having. I'm not saying is democracy dying just because of the corruption, which there is. There's a ton of corruption going on in the political process. People buying their ways into debates like Bloomberg is right now. There's a lot of things we can argue in the corruption side of it. But that starts to get a little bit conspiratorial. I'm talking about just the information age that we live in right now. And we are just being fed bullshit after bullshit. And it's getting really hard for people to decipher it and to know what's true. And I think a true democracy, we should be promoting the policies over everything else. What is this person's policy? And you can go back to record. You don't have to attack their personality, but you can go back to record. Joe Biden has talked about cutting Social Security before, and I think he should be held accountable for that. And this is another reason to vote in Bernie Sanders. He's got the consistent record from the 70s. But, I understand I'm new to analyzing politics, and I'm not the best source for this, and this is why we try not to do a ton of political things, especially when Chisholm's here, and as soon as Chisholm's gone, this is what happens. But it worries me. It worries me for a lot of reasons. And when you do something like, when you have the trial outcome the way it has, and I understand that the vote is Wednesday, but he's going to get acquitted. When you vote against witnesses in a trial after saying that that any president, hypothetically, if they believe that them being reelected is in the best interest of the American people, they're allowed to hold aid to a country for political gain. So they can do whatever they want to get reelected. Pretty much saying he can do whatever he wants to get reelected, whether it's abuse of power or not. If he thinks it's in the best interest of the American people, it's a slippery slope to a dictatorship. So if Trump gets away with this and realizes he's going to get away with this, if he is in a general election and he starts losing, he can just yell corruption and say, oh, this is rigged. And I think that in the best interest of the American people, I'm going to just stop this election. I'm going to freeze the election, and I'm going to stay president until I investigate this and blah, blah, blah. He can just pretend that there's whatever corruption he wants to believe there is, and he can just hold up the election. He can just hold on to power as much as he wants. As long as the military is behind him, he can hold on to power as much as he wants. And you can pretend like that's not going to happen, but this happens in countries. It's never happened in the most powerful country in the world, but we've never had Trump before. He's a megalomaniac. He's a narcissist megalomaniac. And you have no idea what he's going to do when his back is against the wall. That all being said, by the time this general comes around, he might just be tired and want out. CNN, Rob has left another comment. Thank you, Rob, for participating in this conversation. The only one. No judgment. CNN says that since the beginning of his tyranny, Trump has led in a public setting via Twitter, interviews, etc. over... Oh, he has lied. Sorry, I said led. He has lied in public setting via Twitter, interviews, etc. over 17,000 times, all documented. Yeah, obviously CNN is biased, but if this is true, which I'm sure it is, he lies about everything, it's pretty daunting. The other thing is, it's starting to hurt my head. The other thing that's just crazy is like all the weird narratives he's been pushing out. Like the fact that those don't red flag for Trump supporters. And I'm not here to shit on Trump supporters, because I think some people have done that unjustifiably, especially on the Democratic side. Or CNN, they just had this happen where two anchors were laughing about something, and then they started doing Trump supporter voices of all Southern people. The people that voted for Trump are disenfranchised Americans, and then you rich ass anchors on CNN are laughing at people that are struggling in real life situations, while you just pump whatever narrative you're told to pump because of your donors, right? Which is usually anti-Medicare for all, but that's a whole other thing. But I mean, if Trump has, I mean, sorry, we know Trump has lied. But some of the weird things that I don't understand are things like, oh, now you want to come back up, Party Boy? He's running away from me. Now he wants back up. When Trump was talking about toilets, like, what were you even trying to? You have to, sometimes people have to flush like 10, 12, 11 times. What the fuck are you talking about? Who flushes 10, 11 times? Like, when did this become a debatable topic about toilets? He, at a Trump rally, so the Trump safe space, he had the crowd like yell back toilets. He's like, you know what I'm going to say? And everyone yelled toilets. Check my fucking ears after that one. Yeah, like the crowd yelled toilets. Like, what is going on? And I think this is the world we live in, where it's no longer, where reality doesn't really matter. And I've kind of made this correlation to parallel universes before, how we look at parallel universes as this like existential, abstract concept, but we have parallel universes now. You can change the word universes if you want, but when you have all these different narratives and people believing their own truths, we're all living in different worlds at this point. And you add algorithms and echo chambers into that, and we all stay in our own separate realities, void of truth, where truth doesn't even matter. I don't even know what's true half the time. And this is, again, why we have this podcast, because it's kind of me filtering through and helping people feed out the bullshit. And sometimes I get it. Sometimes I can fact check something really quick that other people just choose not to fact check. Natural News, I did a video on that. You can check that out on YouTube. And while you're there, like and subscribe if you like the content. I'm not begging for views, and I never will. So some of the stuff's easy to debunk, but some stuff, like, it's so confusing to me. And I have a full-time plus job where I work minimum 40 hours plus a week. I don't always have time to feed through all the bullshit. And if all you're watching is mainstream news, Randy Taylor has joined us. Hello, Randy. Yeah. So like Rob's with me on this, and hey, I'm going to give you my biases up front. I'm about people. I'm a people person. I care more about the collective good than myself. I'm not a greedy person. I'm not a materialistic person. I'm not saying I wouldn't enjoy a raise at this point, because I still struggle financially. But I do things out of just curiosity, which is what this podcast is about. Also, I like to know when I'm being fucked over. And I know ignorance is bliss, and I don't blame anyone for wanting to be ignorant at this point. But for me, if I'm going to get fucked over, I want to know that I'm being fucked over. And in this day and age, like, it's hard to know what's going on. And I think even just the fact that we can't get straight answers from politicians is good enough evidence that democracy is dead. Away from all the corruption. And we get in Canada too. Trudeau spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to go on vacation, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars of taxpaying money to protect Harry and his wife, or the prince and his wife. There's corruption parts of it too. You have lobbyists that lobby to governments, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars, billions of dollars collectively. All these reasons point to democracy being dead. When you have the majority of people vote somebody in the United States, and that person doesn't become president of the United States, that leans towards democracy being dead. So it starts to become more of an illusion of democracy. The best slaves are the ones that don't know they're slaves. That's pretty extreme. That's a little extreme. And I know other people feel like that. And I know a lot of people don't necessarily want to get involved here. And I know these are iffy topics. And I'll admit that my views are extreme. I'm a big Peter Joseph fan. I'm a big Venus Project fan. Right? I'm all about changing the collective mindset of society to get away from greed and materialistic things. And I think their collectivism, if done right, can really boost the overall collective health of a society. So if we just look at markers of actual like physical and mental health and just basic survival, I think it's all doable if you do things like open source, right? So open source technology so everybody can work on finding ways to feed and house everyone. Those are extreme views. I don't think they're extreme. I don't find them extreme. Kyle Johnson has joined us. Tim Wilson has joined us. I don't necessarily truly believe that my views are extreme, but in where we're at now in political discourse and just discourse in general, my views would be extreme, where I feel that everybody in the world should be housed and fed. And I don't believe we should all have to work 40 hours a week. Because right now when we have cyclical consumption, how many jobs are just creating things that nobody really fucking needs? Oh, well, that's just the way humans are. They just have infinite wants. If people just naturally have infinite wants, how come marketing is $1 billion industry, convincing people that they need things that they don't need? Why is your attention up for sale in every moment you're online? Pop-up ads. So I don't necessarily think my views are extreme, but in the context of what we're talking about, sure. Yeah, I'm trying. I know, and this is it is why I call this podcast World of Gray, because I know that what I'm saying is going to seem extreme, and I know there's other opinions and other platforms that people have that might be more doable for the world we live in now, and I'm wrong a lot, and that's not the point of what I'm trying to say here. Jeff Reed on the Watch Party has commented, democracy was dead in Canada a long time ago. The British system we built on, unfortunately, runs on party lines. So therefore are no room in the party for dissenting views. Yeah. So, and I know I get pretty ranty, and this is why sometimes these live streams when I don't have Chisholm get a little off the rails. And I know this is a lot for us to all take in, and being involved in the political process, or at least the discourse, tends to turn into a bit of a shit show, especially when you're on Twitter. I've joked that Twitter is the toilet of civil discourse, but Tara has joined us. But I strongly feel that these smaller conversations are important. I think conversations that are not influenced by any corporate donors or, just influenced by a third party, people's real opinions, and getting more of people's real opinions based off, actual research and facts, or even if it's just a little bit that I do, and talking to each other and trying to, find some sort of middle ground or have enough discourse that we can all kind of come, oh yeah, that makes sense. I like what you said there. And okay, maybe I didn't look at it that way. Peaceful discourse, I think, is important. I think it's hard because Jeff agrees with me about the Twitter comment. I think it's hard because we're all busy. A lot of people have families. They're just trying to feed their kids. We all get caught up in the everyday life, the everyday hustle. And it's really hard for us to voice opinions on political discourse because we are all just a bunch of people living in a society divided by black and white arguments. And you know what? Whether I'm making money on this, whether we get a ton of views or not, I will always be here to help you fight the good fight and explore the world of gray. I am Kelowna's Cougar Meat Kid, Colin Cutler. This is Hardy Boy, my podcast partner for the day. Thank you for joining us. Peace, love, happy Sunday.